Hello and good evening to everyone. I hope you're able to hear me out and are able to see my full screen as well. Santosh, can you just confirm once?
Yes, everything is fine.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you very much, Mr. Santosh and Dr. Sundar, the Indian Structural Integrity Society, for giving me this opportunity to present some of our work that we have been doing of late with what are called as clamped geometries, which are geometries that are applicable for both micro and macro scale fracture toughness testing. So I'll give you an overview of everything that we have been doing. If I can operate the chat section, I would like to just put up an advertisement here for a conference that we'll soon be organizing as part of the Indian Structural Integrity Society and in collaboration with the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Which I hope you are able to see here. So the Structural Integrity Conference and Exhibition has moved to the electronic mode this year because of the COVID-19 situation that turned up. So for those who are attending this particular session, we would request that for those who are interested in structural integrity, please do have a look at our website. And the abstracts deadline is open till 15th of August and may also get an extension. So if you're interested in submitting an abstract, please do so during this time frame. Thank you. Yeah, so I would like to begin with acknowledgements. Basically, everyone who has contributed to this development of this particular fracture toughness testing geometry from the time when I was a PhD student in the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and where I continue to collaborate with, especially Professor Vikram Jairam. Then Max Planck Institute for Eisenforschung Düsseldorf in Germany, where I continue to work on these and several other fracture testing geometries, and they also fund me for a project currently. And then there are, of course, facilities at IIT Bombay, which have enabled this work to continue. And more importantly, the funding that comes from the seed grant at IIT Bombay and the Max Planck Society, which is a partner group that works and also funds these projects that I'm currently doing. And like I said, many thanks for the Indian Structural Integrity Society for providing me this particular platform to utilize. So just again, a very short advertisement of the Department of Metallurgical Engineering and Material Science, where I come from. I have been an assistant professor there for the last nearly 4 years. And this is our group, the Micromechanics of Materials group, that logo that you can see here. We are a fairly large department, a faculty of 36, working on various aspects of metallurgy and material science, from multi-scale modeling to physical mechanical metallurgy to corrosion to process metallurgy, polymers, biomaterials, and material science, you name it. We have a large group of students, primarily undergrads for about 400, but also a lot of PhD students, nearly 200 of them, and a lot of institute postdocs who are now joining as the institute was given the tag of IOE, the Institute of Eminence. And so are the facilities. We have very sophisticated facilities that have come up, that have been there and are open to the public to use, sometimes on a paid basis, but for nominal fees. So these are the various characterization, testing, and processing related facilities that are available, and I've only listed a few of them. Yeah, so getting to the outline of the actual talk of why we are here, I wanted to go through this process just to tell you, along which direction I'm going to head. So why do we need yet another fracture toughness test geometry? We have so many already in place, right? So I'm going to give a background of that. Then I'm going to talk about what exactly is this clamped geometry condition or a boundary condition that we are going to apply and why we came up with something like that. Then I'll talk about the details of the clamped condition for both the beam cross section and the wire cross section, the advantages, limitations, and applications of the same. Then I'll talk about the clamped wire in tension as well. Although in tension, these wires have been very well studied, but we have come across some recent changes or advances in understanding them. So I'm going to talk about that if time permits. And moving forward, where we are heading with respect to specimen and crack configurations, what effects they have on the measurement of fracture toughness from different geometries. So then I'll summarize. So how do we assess structural integrity, right? That is the key that begins all this story about measuring fracture toughness, first of all. So the structural integrity of any component, if one has to analyze, then there are three main components to it. One is that you need to have a stress analysis carried out for that structure. You need to find out where there are maximum stresses, which might, be the pressure points for failure. So that can be done with some model structures where you apply real-time loads, or by numerical finite element sort of modeling techniques. Then, of course, you also need to know the largest defects and their distribution in such a structure, so which is usually done by non-destructive evaluation techniques. But the third critical segment of this structural integrity assessment is the measurement of fracture toughness itself, because you need to know at what point the material will break, right? So what is the critical load that it can take, given that there are certain defects of a particular size. So for that, one needs to evaluate materials' fracture toughness and the crack growth mechanisms in these materials. And that comes under the domain of fracture toughness testing methods and standards that have been developed. And if you look at all the useful fracture toughness test geometries, they all have originated due to practical considerations of the material, right? We could have just one testing method, like you had to have in intention when you're looking for yield strength measurement. You do a normal uniaxial tensile test. But in case of fracture toughness testing, the origins are more practical, and people have come up with various geometries in order to not change the specimen, instead use the specimen configuration that is existing and measure its fracture toughness. For example, if you have a disc-shaped specimen and then you have a disc-shaped tension, if you have a half disc-shaped specimen, then you have something like this. When you have brittle materials, then you have what is called a single-edge notch bending specimens, and so on. So there are tons of geometries that have come from practical consideration. So I'm going to tell you why we came up with yet another new geometry, and that origin has come from us trying to measure fracture properties of materials at smaller dimensions or smaller length scales, where none of these geometries or their boundary conditions would work very well. So before I begin, I do not know the particular audience, so just to give a short introduction of what we are looking at. So what we measure is the driving force for crack growth. So you have let's say a rectangular beam, and you have an initial crack that you make in the sample, and you load it in, for example, a 3-point bending configuration. Then what you would obtain is the far field applied stress that is applied on the material and the crack length that is already there in the sample, if the combination of which will give you what is called as the stress intensity factor. The stress intensity factor is basically telling you the strength of the singularity in front of the crack tip, because if you can see here from the stress contour of the FEM model, the maximum stress concentrates in front of the crack. But not only that, there is a singularity that emerges in front of the crack, and the amplitude of the singularity is given by what's called as K. So if you see, there is another factor here that comes up, which is called as the geometric factor, or what can be called as the normalized stress intensity factor. And that refers to the strength of the geometry in concentrating that particular K in a particular way. So I will just show how you measure a fracture toughness from that. So you load such a specimen, and you see that it breaks at a critical load. If it's a linear elastic brittle material, then you would just see a linear elastic load displacement response and then a fracture point. That critical load gets converted to critical stress, and corresponding critical stress intensity factor is called otherwise as the mode 1 fracture toughness of the material. So basically, we are trying to measure the material's resistance to crack growth and not to crack initiation. So you already have an initial crack that is set up in the material. And the geometric factor for a 3-point bending beam, which looks like this, is a complicated formula that is obtained either using numerical solutions or analytically if it's a simple configuration. So basically, for measuring fracture toughness, you need a simple configuration whose stress state, the far field applied stress state, is well known, and the initial crack length is also well defined. So Yes, so there are many geometries that are available, and those are listed here. And the geometric factor of each of these geometries is sort of plotted as a function of the relative crack length. Relative crack length is A by W. So as you can see that the geometric factor, if I take an A by W of 0.6, then the geometric factor for a bending configuration, that is a single edge notch bend specimen, is much higher than, let's say, the double edge notch tension or the central crack tension specimen. So that tells me that the severity with which this bending geometry will cause crack to grow will be much higher than the one for the DE&T or the CCT specimen. Basically telling me that for a given material with a material property of K1C, the fracture load for a SEB specimen is going to be much lower than the fracture load for the DE&T or the CCT specimen. So one cannot make sense out of the fracture load, one has to make sense of the fracture toughness that you get. So in a way, the geometric factor is a measure of the severity of the geometry to propagate the crack. So each of the stress states will cause a different magnitude of the driving force for crack growth. And this, one can imagine why this happens, because if you look at the cross section here, this particular cross section sees uniform tension, whereas this particular cross section sees a gradient in tension where there is higher tension here compared to here. So naturally, the geometric factor for this specimen is higher than this particular specimen. So the point that I was trying to make is that most of these fracture toughness test geometries that are used for materials as of today are unstable, because as you can see, the geometric factor goes on increasing as a function of A by W. So this monotonic increase does not allow for the crack to arrest for a homogeneous monolithic specimen. Well, that's not a problem if you want to just measure the fracture toughness, the initiation fracture toughness of a material, but you usually want to get more or extract more out of a particular specimen, and that I will come to in a little while. So yeah, so why can't we use these existing bulk testing standards? Because we are in the age of miniaturization. We are dealing largely with coatings, with thin films, with microelectronic devices where each of the individual components are, nanometer to micrometer length scale. Within them, there are lots of gradients in microstructure and composition and so on. And the properties at each of these points will be very different. And putting up, making or cutting out a sample which will look like a 3-point bending beam will be next to impossible for this, because where do we put the roller supports for a beam which is just about, let's say, 10 or 50 microns in length, right? So geometries in tension become very difficult to grip because these are very brittle materials. Geometries in bending also require these supports which cannot be inserted. The dimensions will not comply with the ASTM standard requirements. And there is difficulty to achieve stable growth, crack growth in such small width of the specimen itself. So if I have to make a specimen within this region, then it's very hard for me to have any region that can achieve a crack growth which I can observe during the loading process. So then, why do we have to look at a particular application? Why can't I just use the bulk K1C that I know of? For example, for PT-NIAL, I can cast a bulk PT-NIAL and I can try to measure the K1C. But of late, over the last few decades, it has been clearly seen by a lot of researchers that the material properties are vastly different at micron length scales compared to the macro length scale. For example, here what is shown is a BATiO3, barium titanate single crystal. BATiO3 is extensively used in piezoelectric and ferroelectric applications, which means it's used at small length scales in form of thin films, and even in form of single crystals, it's used in micro electronic devices. So if I make pillars of this particular material and I push them in compression, then I see that the yield strength of the material goes up and up, or what I call as the failure stress keeps on increasing till it reaches near theoretical strength values. Now, the explanation is not something I will go into in detail, but all that you can see is that the yield strength of the material itself changes and the failure mode changes from cracking to plastic deformation or flow. So these sort of vast changes that occur with smaller length scales then brings us to the point of what happens to fracture toughness. Well, even at the macro length scale, it's not clear how the fracture toughness scales with, let's say, the failure strength of the material, because you see some of these for a given class of materials, like the curves that you're seeing here, which are horizontal, there is no correlation, but there are some curves which are showing a strong correlation. for both these things, it becomes very hard to just predict from the yield strength what should happen to the fracture toughness of the material. So these are the reasons why we wanted to look at K1C at the length scale of the application of that particular device or structure. So coming to what is this particular geometry, the clamp beam bend geometry. For those who want to know more, there is a lot of papers that we have published in this particular geometry, and they can have a look at it later. I can also give a link in the chat section at the end of the talk. So it came up as a sample that was given to me, which was a coating which was very small in length scale, which is about 100 microns in width, and we were wondering how to test the fracture behavior of such a geometry. And the idea that came to us was from two different sort of length scales. One is this sort of bridge structure. So we see these bridges all the time, and you have the two ends fixed, and you have the beam that is supported, but it's not a simply supported, or it's not a 3-point bend configuration. This is actually a doubly clamped configuration. So this is what I call as the clamp beam. Now, such structures were also very visible in microelectronic devices, because they would do this by lithography and by etching out, and you will see this sort of segment which is stuck to the material at the two ends. So this is sort of elastically clamped at the two ends, and you would see the beam that is available for testing. So clearly this looked almost like a 3-point bending beam. So we went ahead and tested a particular sample. In the present days, we have these various facilities for micro machining, like focused end beam machining. We have facilities to micromechanically load them using a nano indenter, and you can watch it in situ using an electron microscope. So that was what was done here. So if you can look at the video of this particular clamp beam, which is being loaded now, you can watch what happens as the crack tends to grow. So this is a brittle intermetallic material, right? Platinum nickel aluminide. But you see that the crack grows progressively for some time, and then it actually stabilizes, and the material is able to take higher and higher loads. Now, is this a material property that it is able to take higher loads, or is this something to do with the geometry itself? This is what we were perplexed about. We assumed that one could use the single edge notch bending sort of a configuration to apply and obtain the K1C of the material. So we took a look at that. So we modeled the 3-point bending beam and the clamp beam bend configurations, and obtained the stress energy factor K1, plotted it as a function of the different A by W's. So now if you remember one of the slides that I showed early on, the single edge notch bending beam shows a monotonic increase in K1 with increasing A by W. But the clamp beam bend did not seem to do that. It in fact increased and stabilized, and in fact decreased after a particular A by W ratio, which means that for beam with a crack length of, let's say, about A by W of 0.4 or 0.5, I see a decrease in the driving force for crack growth as the crack increases in length, which means I need to apply a higher load before I continue to break that specimen or continue the crack to grow, even though the material's fracture toughness may be constant across the width of the specimen. So that is what this implies. And we wondered why this was the case, that why this was so different. And then we realized that the stresses that concentrate at the tensile edge for a 3-point bending now have 3 different positions or locations to concentrate in. So that's the center and the 2 edges where we clamp the specimen. So this gave us a clue about why there is such a large difference as you increase the crack length. So we evaluated the normalized stress energy factor, which is nothing but the geometric factor that I was talking about earlier as well, for different A by W's and for different L by W ratios. When I mean L by W, it's the length to width of the specimen. So I would, in the future, I would call this as the beam aspect ratio. So this is the relative crack depth, and this is the beam aspect ratio. And as you can see, there is a decrease in the normalized K1 with increasing A by W for small aspect ratios of these kinds of clamp beams. And this continues for L by W's of up to about 8. But beyond that, there is a slight increase in the normalized K1 before it tends to decrease again. So the point is that if the beam aspect ratio increases, then this zone or this region of stable crack growth in fact goes down. The region of stability is reached right at the point of 0.2 for, let's say, L by W of 4, but it is reached only at a point of A by W of about 0.45 or 0.5 for an L by W of 16. So the L by W of 16 is not very useful. If you want to achieve stable crack growth, then what we would need is a smaller aspect ratio specimen. So what we recommended is shorter, thicker beams achieve stability early and therefore can be used. But we've provided the geometric factor solutions for various L by W ratios. So you make a beam of different values. You can still obtain the fracture toughness using these solutions that we provided. So basically, we did these measurements, which I'll come to later. But we also wanted to look at the ability to measure energy release rate using the same particular geometry, because many people tend to report fracture toughness values in terms of the critical energy release rate, GC. So for that, we wanted to evaluate how that changes as a function of crack length. And we evaluated the compliance change as a function of crack length, and we fitted into this particular equation. And we get the G as a function of crack length as well. And we have given solutions for other, so the same set of beam aspect ratios again. And it matches very well what we get directly from FEM and what we get from the compliance technique. So that shows us that what we are heading in is in the right direction. Yeah, so some results that we come to. First, we tested on known material like polymethyl methacrylate, which is a linear elastic brittle polymer, which is extensively used for these kinds of calibrations and validations. So this is a macro scale geometry. We loaded it in bending. And as you can see here, using critical loads, we were able to calculate both the fracture energy in terms of GC as well as K1C. And the K1C that we get from the G and the K1C that we get directly from our normalized solutions also match very well. And this value of about 0.75 to 0.75 to 1 MPa root meter is what is reported for PMMA also in the literature. So this led us to get confidence that this particular geometry works very well for macro scale as well. This again we tested for a material with a not so well established fracture toughness, which is the tungsten carbide cobalt in the bulk, and we obtained for a high strength tungsten carbide cobalt a value of about 7.2 MPa root meter. So the behavior was linear elastic up to the point of failure. But as you can see, the crack even in tungsten carbide cobalt has grown to a certain extent and stabilized because it's a clamp beam geometry. If this was 3-point bending, then it would have gone through completely. In the bond code, like I said, the video that I already showed, for that particular specimen, we could measure a fracture toughness of about 5 MPa root meter. So all of these we applied as of now, as of today, only for linear elastic fracture mechanics. We are in the process of developing the same for elastic plastic, but we have not made much headway there. The next I'll come to is the clamped wire geometry, which is a modification because we were dealing also with wire or cylindrical wires which had a circular cross section. These were used in a multitude of applications, including in suspension bridge cables where you have these high strength perlitic steel wires. There are also wires that are used in copper interconnects and at the small length scales. So there are again variable length scale applications, and length scale compatibility is important here as well. The other point that was of importance was that the wire length, again, the aspect ratio of the wire. Here we talk about the aspect ratio as the height versus the diameter. So that aspect ratio is also a variable. Let's say I pick up a fiber and each of the fibers has a different length. It's very hard to cut that particular fiber. So I make a notch and I test them under bending. Then I should be able to extract the fracture toughness of that particular fiber. And then I can incorporate that in certain micromechanical models where I look at composites and so on. Yeah, so again, we came up with solutions for the normalized stress intensity factor or the geometric factor as a function of the A by D, but as well as a function of the H by D. Again, what I want to highlight here is that the aspect ratio keeps coming up as another variable which people have tend to ignore for a long time. They have always written geometric factors as a function of relative crack depth alone. But we have seen that for these kinds of asymmetric notches, the aspect ratio of the beam also plays a very important role. So one can, of course, fit it into equations. And as you can see, again, for small aspect ratios, there is a good chance that the material shows stable crack growth. Whereas for the longer ones, you don't see that kind of stability for longer cracks. But even for the larger aspect ratios, there is a range of crack lengths where the crack can grow stably in these wires. And in these wires, this happens because the cross section that the crack propagates into does not remain constant. As we go from 0.3 to 0.5, in fact, the crack is expanding in area. And then from 0.5 to 1, it is decreasing in area. So that is the reason that you see this kind of scatter or difference. But why does it show a difference in terms of the H by D? So this, what we have plotted here to explain the same is the maximum principal stress at location 1 with respect to location 2. This is in front of the crack tip, and this is at the two fixed edges of the wire or the beam. Now, if you look at for a small crack of A by D of 0.3 versus a long crack of 0.6, let's say the crack grew from 0.3 to 0.6. Then for a small aspect ratio wire, the max PS in fact decreases at the center from this ratio of 4.3 to 2.59. Whereas for a longer wire of, let's say, 50 or 100, the max PS at the location 1 increases from 7 to 15. So what this tells us is that for shorter wires, the stresses at the edges become concentrated and sort of take away the driving force from the crack tip at the center. And because of which the driving force for crack growth goes on decreasing as we move to longer crack lengths. But this sort of advantage that is provided by the shorter wires goes away when you have longer wires, because now you are very far away. The boundary condition is so far that the specimen almost behaves like a tensile specimen. It does not see the effect of the two edges, and the crack continues to grow in an unstable manner. So this crack stability was demonstrated at both bulk and the micron scale. This is a sample that was carried out in IISc, where you see that at different loads, you see a stable crack growth in glassy structures and in PMMA, and with higher and higher load. But the K1C of the material was constant. If you measure the K1C at each of these individual load drops that we saw, then it would be a constant because it's a monolithic material. The fracture toughness of the material is not changing, but you can achieve stable crack growth. Same thing with single crystal silicon. This is what we measured with micron scale specimen. As you can see, there are two different segments. The first loading cycle, the sample undergoes crack growth, so there is a displacement jump. Corresponding to that, we measured a fracture toughness of 0.86 MPa/root-meter. We reloaded the sample. Now it loads at a lower stiffness, but it takes up a higher load before it finally breaks. And the corresponding fracture toughness is 0.81. So there is not much difference in the fracture toughness at the different crack lengths that you see. Again, not expected for silicon. It's a monolithic material whose fracture toughness should remain the same. So crack stability was something that we demonstrated. Very quickly, we compared it to other geometries which were non-conventional that were being used at the micron scale. For example, the single cantilever bending, the double cantilever bending, and so on. And we saw that for all of these cases, within about 15% difference, we see that all of them perform pretty well, given that some standards are followed with respect to the calculations of the geometric factor. Same at the micro scale, we looked at single cantilever, the clamp beam, the double cantilever, and the pillar splitting geometry, and all of them sort of gave very similar values of fracture toughness. Now, coming to some of the applications of what is shown here is a graded coating. This is a platinum nickel aluminide bond coat with the microstructure which is very heterogeneous across its cross section. So these are the different zones that we have identified. Not getting into the details of this, but if you can see, there are various types of crack growth mechanisms that are operating in individual zones, and the fracture toughness, the monotonic fracture toughness of each of these zones happens to be very different, and that you can measure only when you did micron scale testing like I was showing earlier. So this is something we could record, and we could say that where would the coating be the most vulnerable. Of course, under actual service loading conditions, it would be either at the substrate coating interface or at the right at the surface between the bond coat and the free surface. But the fracture toughness happens to be lower at the free surface end, whereas it's much higher at the interface between the substrate and the coating. So there are some predictions that you can make and put it into models and look at what happens to crack growth in these kinds of coatings. The other thing we are currently pursuing is to make architectured composites and evaluate their fracture toughness using these kind of geometries. So this is again PMMA, and this is a PMMA with these structures that have been laser cut from them. These are just holes and dots and dashes sort of a thing. So the dots and dashes are basically coming from the features that you would see in a plasma spray coating, the kind of pores that you would see, the intersplat pores and the gas porosities that you would see. So we got inspired from this sort of microstructure and put it into an architecture. And we wanted to see what happens if you just create these holes, because this will make my material less dense. But what it is clearly showing is that the crack grows in one shot for the bulk solid beam, whereas if I have an architecture beam, then I see a number of load drops corresponding to which I see the cracks deflecting and blunting and so on. So I achieve a much higher fracture energy before it completely breaks. So the damage tolerance is improved when I make these architecture composites. And I could not measure this very clearly when I did a 3-point bend test. So when we did a 3-point bend test, the number of load drops is much less. In fact, it looks pretty similar to what a monolithic material would look like. And that's because this geometry is not stable, whereas the clamp beam bend is a very stable geometry. So I can record each of the load drops, and each of those load drops corresponds to the crack moving to the individual features, and that can be recorded, and the R curve can be later determined. The third thing that we are also interested in looking at is how the R curve behavior affects a layered composite film. Let's say you have a multi-layered material. One is a ceramic, hard and brittle, and one is the metallic layer. Individual layer thicknesses are very fine, and the total thickness itself is about 2 to 4 microns. We wanted to again take up this geometry to look at what kind of stabilization, what kind of R curve behavior or resistance to crack growth this multi-layering will provide. So again, when you have a stiffer layer, the stress intensity factor that the material should see in front of the crack tip will go down, because it's sort of going to close the crack. And whereas when you have a compliant layer in front of the crack tip, then it is sort of opens the crack and the driving force will go up. So this is what we could record. This is from simulations, and we are in the process of doing experiments to measure them. This shows that as the crack moves from the TI to the elastically stiffer TIN layer, there is a drop in the stress intensity factor. But then again, when it goes to the TIN layer and approaches the TI, there is an increase in the stress intensity factor. This is for the K1 for a single layer of TIN if it was a monolithic sample, whereas this is the case for a multi-layered sample. So there is a substantial difference in K1 that one would, or the driving force for crack growth that one could record if you have this particular geometry. Then there are other people who have worked a lot in this particular domain to be able to, for example, elucidate the different mechanisms that occur in brittle systems as a function of temperature. This is an example for silicon where it was heated at different temperatures and tested at those particular temperatures. And one can clearly see dislocation mechanisms that come up, which you would otherwise not be able to see, because if you don't have stable crack growth, then this beam is completely broken and you will not be able to take out a specimen and image it like this. So different mechanisms become obvious when you have a stable geometry. Similarly, when you have cyclic loading or fatigue applications, then the slow crack growth can be easily captured using a clamp beam bending, and there is good amount of work that is published by Professor Vikram Jairam's group, which shows the change in stiffness and correlates it to the increase in crack length corresponding to different number of cycles, and one can sort of predict the fatigue failure in structures, including in thin films and coatings as well. Then this was a recent work that we came across, which uses the clamped wire condition in bending, which is using a biological composite, which has a cylindrical structure with a circular cross section. If you can see the dimension, this is just about 20 microns in its cross section. And they could make a notch and determine what is called as the R curve behavior of biological composites and explain the mechanisms, just again because you can stabilize the crack. So does it mean that there are no problems with this geometry? Clearly no, there are challenges. One thing is about using the right kind of punch. Many people end up using a Berkovich tip or a cube corner tip to do these kind of micro scale tests. But what you should ideally use is a wedge tip with a particular radius, and the radius of that particular tip also will depend on whether you have a low yield strength material or a high yield strength material, and whether you have a low aspect ratio or a high aspect ratio of the beam. For a given fracture toughness of the material, if I keep the K1C fixed, then the critical load at which the material would break would be higher for a lower L/W or lower aspect ratio beam, but that also corresponds to a higher contact stress at the point of the punch making a contact with your beam. So one should not allow the yielding to take place because of contact. So that is the problem that we need to overcome, and that can be overcome by making using a larger radius of the punch or the indenter. But the problem with making larger radius punches is that the alignment with respect to the crack length will then sort of go haywire, which is what I'm going to show next, because a load line misalignment is another issue. If you have a misalignment with respect to the notch tip, then you will have a mixed mode crack growth rather than mode 1. So you'll be measuring what is called as mixed mode fracture toughness. But one can, of course, simulate or model this and look at the extent of K2 over K1 and be able to separate out the contributions from this. The third important problem with this geometry is the edge cracking. Because it is held fixed at the two ends, the higher stress concentrations there will lead to defects sort of flaring up and cracking at the fixed edges. Again, shorter beams are prone to this because they are subjected to a higher load and therefore a higher stress at the edges. So one needs to find out again solutions. One of the solutions that were provided by another group was to make this sort of bow type specimen, where you increase the thickness of the beams along the edges so that the stresses don't concentrate so severely anymore, and you see the crack growing in the main crack growing across. So if I have time for it, I will also cover some recent advances in understanding that we achieved in the clamped wire, but now in tension. So tension is a geometry that has also been widely used to test wire specimen because it's easy to put, clamp it into a pulley and then sort of pull it. And you can make a notch, and then this is a rod specimen, but wires and rods, all of them with a circular cross section, can be measured using this particular geometry. Now, what has already been studied is the geometric factor as a function of the relative crack depth, the crack aspect ratio as well, because if you have a convex or a concave shaped crack and not a straight crack, then how does that affect? And the location of the point on the crack front. So suppose you're here versus here versus here, then you don't have the same K1 or the driving force as you would have for a rectangular cross section. If you had a rectangular cross section, then the each point would behave the same way and would see the same kind of driving force, but that's not the case for a circular cross section, where you have the curvature which is changing continuously. So we collated the geometric factor solutions from various authors right from the 1980s. Some of them are not very well defining the geometric conditions, and their softwares don't allow them to refine the mesh a lot, so their solutions may be slightly off. But even among the recent ones, we saw that wide variations in the geometric factor. So we were perplexed, and we looked at what the differences were, and we saw that again the aspect ratio of the wire, the H/D ratio, is different for each of these authors. Some of them have not defined it, but some of them who have defined take up different values. But as you can see in the geometric factor calculation, they don't take that into consideration at all. So that is what we wanted to sort of again recalculate by doing these geometric factor calculations for different H/D ratios. So this is what one of my students did, using which you can see that for small H/D ratios, the geometric factor becomes it's still a monotonic increase, but it sort of stabilizes and then grows very gradually at longer A/W ratios, or A/D ratios in this case. Whereas for longer wires, the increase is much more sharper. So one can, of course, fit it into equations, and we could also fit it into a three-dimensional equation where you add the H/D along one axis and the A/D along the other axis, and provide solutions as a combination of the two factors. Again, the conclusion remains that shorter wires are more stable than longer ones. Now, why is there the aspect ratio effect at all? So that is what we're trying to show here. So suppose you have a tensile sample, the asymmetric notch, that is one-sided notch, that causes a bending contribution to come up because the tensile axis is constrained. So when the crack opens up here, then this leads to bending in the x direction. So that bending contribution increases the K1. The aspect of the COD going up also shows that there is an increase in the K1 for longer aspect ratio wires, whereas that aspect is smaller for the shorter aspect ratio wires. This is all for the same applied far field stress. So the stress is constant here. So this is the conclusion we come to, that the asymmetric notch results in a bending superimposition on the tensile load, which is what results in the severe effect of the aspect ratio. But these sort of plateaus down at larger aspect ratio. So if you have very large aspect ratio wires, then you don't have to care about the H/D. This is something we also saw here, that they sort of plateau and fall on top of each other when you have higher H/Ds, but it becomes important when you go to lower H/D values. So again, we did validation of clamped wire in tension, but this is not a wire. This is a rod specimen, again with PMMA, because, well, that's the cheapest material that we could lay our hands on. And we calculated, we measured the fracture toughness for two different H/Ds of 2 and 10. And the value that we get, which is close to 1 ampere/root-meter for the notch toughness, is closest to what is reported in the literature, whereas all the other solutions that are provided by other authors, some of them in fact overestimate the fracture toughness by a lot. Now there is still a difference between the fracture toughness that is obtained between the aspect ratio of 2 and 10, right? So this we are hypothesizing is because of this bending, there is contribution of mode 3 that also occurs, and the H/D of 2 sees a more mixed mode fracture as compared to the H/D of 10. So I'm not going to get into the details of that, but that's something we have explored. And using these revised solutions, we have proposed that some of the reported values of fracture toughness need to be revised, especially the ones which have been tested at smaller H/Ds. They in fact need to be revised. This is for cold drawn perlitic steel wire, which is what we started out with. And the fracture toughness values that were reported were about 40 ampere/root-meter, but our recent calculations gave it a slightly lower value. Now, of late, we have also been looking at various other crack configurations, which include, so the single straight edge created these problems. So we wanted to see what happens to the double straight edge versus circumferential crack configuration. We also wanted to see what happens when you have a convex or a concave edge crack, because when you cut a specimen, it's difficult to achieve a straight notch. Especially when you do it with the laser, you end up getting a notch which looks like this. So we wanted to look at different configurations, and the chevron is something that has been used in fracture toughness testing. So we wanted to also explore that. And not going into the details of that, but there are some interesting results that are coming out of these calculations as well. So in the single straight crack sample, you see that for the H/D of 4, you have a lower geometric factor as compared to H/D of 10. But for a double straight edge sample, it's going in the reverse direction. Whereas the aspect ratio doesn't seem to play so much of a role at all for the circumferential crack. This is expected, right? Because circumferential crack does not result in bending of the sample because it's a symmetric crack. So we see that for different H/Ds, the geometric factor remains the same. So these are some of the things that we have evaluated. This I will skip, but I wanted to tell that the position along which you are at the notch tip also matters, and you can sort of predict in which way the crack would grow for different configurations. For example, for this particular specimen, the stress intensity factor happens to be highest here compared to here, so the criticality is reached here first. So a straight edge sample would convert to what is called as a convex edge sample. So if you do a fatigue pre-cracking, then this is how it would look like. So then again, whether you can use the geometric solutions of this or should you have to go for this and so on. So the nitty-gritties of that are also being explored. Yeah, so final thoughts. What use does breaking things have? Well, we would like to design length scale compatible geometries to be able to evaluate mechanical properties of materials across the length scales of their real applications in service, because I hope I have convinced you that it's important to measure it at the length scale of application, because sometimes you don't end up getting the microstructure that you would see at the smaller length scale at the actual bulk length scale. So this is important to estimate life and reliability. And that is critical for structural integrity assessment in order to extend the life of these systems or materials by then redesigning or engineering architectures that enhance the fracture resistance of materials, like we are doing with the certain architectures and multi-layers and so on. So that would improve, of course, life and sustainability of these structures. And of course, the most important and primary reason that we are doing this is because it's fun inventing certain geometries and looking at them. Thank you very much. If you have any